What is a co-op? A co-op is, there are co-ops in many different realms. So as we talked earlier, the credit union is a co-op. It is member-owned. Many of you probably shop at worker co-ops. The reason I bring this up is that housing co-ops are part of a much broader movement. They say that worldwide there are 1 billion members of cooperatives. Pretty interesting. Many people don't even know. People come to the co-op credit union or any number of other credit unions and don't realize it is a cooperative. It's member-owned. You have elections for the board of directors and so on. Democratic. So, I don't know whether is anyone here familiar with the Rochdale Principles? Do you know what Rochdale is? Okay, Rochdale is credited as being the first cooperative. It was developed in England in the early 1800s at a time of hardship and famine. The workers got together and created their own consumer-owned grocery, really much more than grocery. It sold all kinds of goods to the workers at cost, or cost with a small markup to cover. And basically a set of principles were developed, and they really run through all types of co-ops. Voluntary membership, you don't discriminate against anyone being a member. The democratic control, it is resident owned, 1 vote per member. The limited return on equity capital, this again is especially true in housing co-ops. There are limited equity cooperatives. The surplus belongs to the user owners. This means that basically anything that would otherwise be perceived as profit gets reinvested into the project. In a co-op, you put that money into reserves so that you're sure to be able to make repairs when they become necessary. Honest business practices, this is transparency. Among your members, you reveal everything. That's something that is so different than so many, other types of businesses where, all the secrets are kept. This is really something, and especially true for housing co-ops. The ultimate aim is to advance the common good. This is one that's often very difficult for people to understand, that you sometimes have to make a decision that doesn't seem like in your own personal best interest, but is the best interest of the group. And, we're a bunch of rugged individualists. We're not used to that. It's important, if you're going to live in a co-op, if you're going to be part of a workers' co-op, that you understand, even if you may not agree with a decision, you have to really be willing to go along with it, or it may be appropriate to separate from the cooperative. Education, again, that's what we're offering tonight. It's when you get into a housing co-op, it's really critical that you take the opportunity to learn new skills and to teach others the skills that you have. It's really about sharing. And cooperation among cooperatives, again, that's something that Bay Area Community Land Trust is committed to. We've established a coalition of housing cooperatives in the East Bay, over 25 co-ops, and we do quarterly meetings where we bring people together and people share their ideas and so on. So next we'll go to really the core in housing co-ops. We kind of focus on 3 of those points. Resident owned. Now people often will get together, maybe rent a big house and move in together, and they call that a co-op. And we really call it a collective because you don't own the building. Too many of us have been in the situation where we've formed a group, it's been really comfortable, and we get evicted because the landlord decides to sell. So resident owned is really important. Self-managed, again, even with some of the larger co-ops, and by larger it's maybe 20 to 50 or even up into the hundreds of units, you may have professional management, but you'll have a board of directors that oversees that, and that's critical. It's that self-management. And again, one person, one vote. In a co-op, it's really one unit. So if you have several people living in the unit, you share one vote. But it really doesn't matter the size of your investment. Each household has the identical same vote. The types of co-ops. Co-ops can range from very small, a single-family home with maybe, as this one, 7 bedrooms, or can be somewhat larger. This is a 60-unit senior co-op here in Berkeley, and they can go up to several hundred units. They're all co-ops. There are also 3 basic types. There's the full equity, the limited equity, and the no equity co-op. I'll talk briefly about the full equity, which is also often called market rate co-op. These are, in a lot of ways, even though they operate under all the same rules that we talked about earlier, the Rochdale Principles, in many ways they look a little bit more like a condominium because you sell them for whatever the market will bear. Typically, prices may start in the $200,000 or $300,000 range and can go up from there. So they're really not affordable, and there are not a lot of new market rate co-ops developed in the Bay Area. New York, if anyone's lived in New York, you know market co-ops in New York. So what we really focus on more is the limited equity and the non-equity co-ops, which are much more affordable for people of low or even moderate incomes. The limited equity and the zero equity co-ops are really what we focus on. A limited equity cooperative, you purchase a share when you move in. That share gives you a right to occupy one unit. You actually don't own the unit, you own a share in the overall cooperative corporation. When you decide to move out, you sell that share back to the co-op and you get a dividend on your investment. Each co-op can have a different formula for how they calculate it, but by state law it cannot be more than 10% per year, again, on your basic investment. So the way that works is, say you have a $10,000 share, you have to pay that when you move in. You get a return. Now, many co-ops limit that to something like the cost of inflation. In some ways, it's like putting that money in a certificate of deposit, and you get a pretty good return on your investment. But the investment is the actual money you put in, not some hypothetical value of the unit the way you would be looking at if this was within the market. The no equity co-op actually operates very much like the limited equity, except when you move in, you do not purchase a share. You pay the security deposit or something, but in all other ways, you elect a board of directors, you are the owner through the nonprofit corporation, but you don't actually have a share in the ownership. Just to wrap up here, the benefits of co-op ownership are really similar to other forms of home ownership, except that sort of dream of possibly making a windfall profit on your investment. Although some people found in the last few years that that was actually sort of a nightmare. Their investment ended up being worth less than what they put in. That really doesn't happen in a co-op. But in exchange for your affordable housing that you get in the co-op, you really have a certain obligation to participate in that co-op. Here is that market rate senior project. Right in front of it is the Parker Street Co-op, which is a limited equity co-op. Just coincidence, they're next door to each other. Here's Parker Street, it's 24 units of a limited equity co-op. Addison Court, 10 units. In West Berkeley, also an LEHC. This is Savo Island, which people may know is just across the street, just across Addison. It's 57 unit, affordable LEHC. This is Rattlesnatch unit in South Central Berkeley. This is Brown Shingle, also 6 units. You'll notice all of these, except for Savile Island, were conversions from existing buildings, but very different kinds of buildings. These were 3 kind of duplexes on neighboring parcels. This is a 9th Street Cooperative. Then we get into what we call the resident-owned nonprofit, or the non-equity. This is another senior project, 61 units, Oregon Park Senior Apartments. It's a resident-owned nonprofit, no equity, but it is owned by the residents. This is Crossroads Village. It's a mutual housing association, again, a form of resident-owned nonprofit. They have different names, they're incorporated in slightly different ways, but 26 units in West Berkeley.
So does anybody own the building that they live in?
In all ways, it is a nonprofit corporation that owns the building. Even that senior co-op, it is a nonprofit corporation that owns the building. In all cases, that ownership is actually very similar. It's just how it's seen by the law. University Avenue, again, is a leasing co-op, 47 units at University in Sacramento, and we're back to our 7-room house.